Okay, this is Contemporary Math, Section 5B, and we're going to be talking about 8 guidelines for evaluating a statistical study. The first guideline is to get a big picture view of the study. What was the goal of the study? What population was under study? Was the study observational or experimental? The second guideline is consider the source. Statistical studies are supposed to be objective. For instance, there was way back in the 70s, I think, it was starting to come out how bad smoking was for you and that it caused lung cancer. And so Philip Morris conducted their own study. Philip Morris is a big tobacco company, and they concluded that smoking was not dangerous. In fact, they even went as far as to say that maybe it was beneficial. So the fact that a tobacco company did their own study on tobacco use and the effects of it made it a little suspicious. So remember, when you're looking at statistical studies, find out who paid for the study. Look for bias in the sample. So selection bias is when researchers select their sample in a way that would make it unrepresentative of the population. Participation bias is whenever people choose to participate. Self-selected or voluntary surveys. Generally, people that agree to do surveys have an agenda. They have a pretty strong opinion of what they want to say. So that would be participation bias, if you get to choose whether you participate. The fourth guideline is to look for problems in defining or measuring the variables of interest. So, for instance, let's say law enforcement says that they stop only 10% of illicit drugs entering the United States. Well, there's really no way to tell that, because we can only record and track the illicit drugs that we're catching. There's no way to know how much we're not catching. So it's really unrealistic to say that we're only catching 10% of it. The fifth guideline is be aware of confounding variables, variables that are not intended to be part of the study. So the book gave a pretty good example. Let's say that there was a study to look at radon gas and if it causes lung cancer. So they took a sample from Colorado where the radon is very high, and then they went to Hong Kong where the radon value or levels are really low. Took a sample from them and found out that the lung cancer rates were about the same in both populations. So then probably a false conclusion would be to say that radon gas does not cause lung cancer because of confounding variables. They didn't look at other things that cause lung cancer, like smoking, which is really high in Hong Kong among the population, and it's relatively lower in Colorado. The sixth guideline is to consider the setting and wording in surveys. Look out for problems with the setting or wording that might produce inaccurate or dishonest responses. The way a survey is worded can guide people to answer a certain way. People are more likely to choose the item listed first in your question. Dishonesty is more likely when the survey concerns sensitive subjects, like, did you smoke marijuana when you were pregnant? Things like that. Or here's a good one. Do you cheat on your taxes? I mean, how many people are going to say, oh, you betcha? All the time. The seventh guideline is to check that results are presented fairly. a statistical study may be misinterpreted in graphs or concluding statements. There's a kind of a joke out there that statistics is the biggest lie. You can kind of make a chart say whatever you want it to just by the way you present it. Reporters misinterpret the results of a study because it makes the story more spectacular. That happens quite often. They use misleading graphs. You want to look for inconsistencies between interpretation of a study in pictures and words and any actual data that's given. And then the 8th guideline is stand back and consider the conclusions. Did the study achieve its goals? Do the conclusions make sense? That's probably the biggest one. Can you rule out alternative explanations for the results? Going back to that lung cancer and radon study. And do the conclusions have practical significance? In other words, a study comes up with a conclusion that doesn't really have any practical application to a person's life. So that's what this looking to see if it has practical significance. And then the assignment for this section is quick quiz 2B on page 316. And that's it.